I am a teacher at Holmes High School. There is a student here with a gun.
He's inside the school shooting at the gun!
Well, I had to do it because somebody had to do something.
After shooting in the theater, I didn't have a plan of whether to die or not.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel, or welcome if you are new, we are happy to have you. Today's video is covering yet another member suggested and voted on case. It's also an updated video on a shooting we covered in the past. As you can tell from the title, today we will be going over the 2012 Aurora movie theater shooting which took place in Colorado. Quickly before we begin, I just wanted to mention my membership, which you can get access to special perks through. It'll be listed in the description, or the pinned comment. Thank you for your consideration. Today's shooter was a 24-year-old man named James Holmes. I'm sure that the majority of you have heard of this case, so if you have, I hope you learned something new from this video. A lot of the information in this video comes straight from James himself, as he had multiple recorded sessions with a psychiatrist that I was able to go through. With that being said, I obviously used numerous other sources for information not touched on in the interviews. Without further ado, let's jump right in. James Egan Holmes was born on December 13, 1987, in San Diego, California. Both of his parents were very successful, with his father being a mathematician and scientist, and his mother being a registered nurse, meaning that the family was very well off. A few years into James's life, his parents welcomed another baby, this time, a girl named Chris. Though he was born in San Diego, James was raised near Salinas, California, a little under 7 hours away, for a good portion of his childhood. This city is where he attended elementary school. In a later interview with psychiatrist Dr. William Reed, James described his home life as normal, happy, warm, and loving, which the doctor then asked him to elaborate on.
How did folks in the family show warm and loving?
Just talking to each other.
They touch each other much?
Hugs.
And how about you? Were you one of the warm, loving folks too?
Yep.
Was that a bit different from what you described as a little shyness in other places?
I wasn't really shy around my own family.
Okay. Would you be a hugger too with the family?
Yeah.
According to him, he and his family had a typical relationship. They would often do an array of activities together, such as going to the beach, visiting the zoo, cooking, and creating art projects. James and his younger sister got along well, and despite him being annoyed when she wanted to shadow him, they did spend a lot of time together. By all accounts, James's childhood was normal, and there weren't any major conflicts or traumas reported in the family. Despite this, throughout his childhood and life, James was seen by several mental health professionals for different reasons. He apparently saw one when he was 8 years old, after an incident where he hit his sister, but sources vary on that detail. I'm not going to dive into each and every time he met with a professional, but I will speak on a few in a while, so let's move on for now. James was a naturally bright student, and always did well in school. This is no surprise knowing that both of his parents were very intelligent, and likely instilled the importance of studying hard on him. He was also very shy though, and had trouble connecting with strangers. This made it a bit harder to socialize with others in school, but it's reported that he did have quite a few friends during his years in elementary school. His sister Chris later testified about how their parents treated them as kids and how involved they were in their lives growing up.
How would you describe your parents to this jury?
Oh, my parents are incredible. Yeah, I feel like I'm luckier than most to have the parents that I do. I think my brother and I are both really lucky. I mean, they've always put a shelter over our heads. They've worked really, really hard to always put food on the table and send us to the best schools and support us in music or sports and whatnot. So, yeah, I love both my parents. I think they're incredible.
Do you think that they were involved in your life, in your school, and things like that?
Absolutely, yeah. They always checked my homework at night and things like that, and they were at every concert and every sports practice or sports game, whatever it happened to be. They were always there.
Did your dad help you with your homework?
Yes, my math homework.
Mm-hmm. And what about your mom?
My mom was more of the English literature, essay writing helper.
Did you see them do that with your brother as well?
Yes, I saw my dad help a lot with my brother. I'm not sure if my mom helped my brother, to be honest, but...
With his schoolwork and such?
Yes.
In your memory, looking back at your life with your family, were your parents, you said they came to like concerts and things that you did?
Yes.
Did they do the same with your brother?
Yes, yeah. My dad coached his soccer team and things like that, so yeah. They were both actively involved in what he was doing.
When James was 12 years old, his parents made the decision to move the family back down to San Diego, where they then settled in a wealthy neighborhood. It was here that James's social skills reportedly began to seriously decline, according to his sister. James later admitted that it was on the drive back to San Diego that he attempted to cut his wrists open with a piece of cardboard. This unsurprisingly didn't do much damage, only breaking the surface of the skin. James said that he did this because he felt ignored, stating that he did not want to leave his already established friend group in Salinas behind by moving away. He later stated that it was around middle school when he began to consider the possibility that he had some sort of mental illness.
How early in your life were you thinking that you were mentally ill?
Late middle school.
And I'm seeing a difference between I'm uncomfortable, I'm not fitting in, or I'm shy. I'm seeing a difference between a kid thinking those things and a kid thinking I'm mentally ill. It's still
I
there.
kind of wanted to find the reasons why those things were happening.
And the phrase mentally ill came up late middle school, is it?
No, I thought the phrase that I would use is like broken brain.
Broken brain, okay. Where'd that phrase come from?
It just appeared.
James claimed that this was one of the reasons why he later chose to study neuroscience in college, because he wanted to figure out why his brain worked the way it did. James seemed to have a huge shift in his life during this time. As mentioned earlier, his sister later stated that after the move back down to San Diego, James found it difficult to adjust. Making friends was tough for him during this time, which led him to begin isolating himself. I just wanted to add a quick interjection, because while it's not super important to the case as a whole, I did find it to be interesting. James later told Dr. Reed that during his childhood, he was afraid of what he called nail ghosts.
You had your own room all this time, right?
Yep.
Were you ever kind of scared in your room by yourself?
I used to think there was something called nail ghosts.
Called what?
Nail ghosts.
Nail goat.
Nail ghosts.
Nail ghosts.
So when I had my bed up against the wall, and ghosts would hammer nails through the wall and kind of poke you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you suppose the nail ghosts came from?
My imagination.
Were they in a book or anything? Or
No, I
your imagination?
never heard of them anywhere else.
Well, then you got to tell me all about them, because psychiatrists really want to hear about those childhood monsters. So tell me about nail ghosts and what they look like, what they did.
They just make it so you can't sleep with your against the wall. You have to kind of be sleeping towards the other side of your bed. Otherwise, the nails will come through the wall and get you.
How did you deal with that? You slept, for one thing, you slept away from the wall, I see,
Yeah.
right? Okay. How else did you deal with it?
Well, I eventually got over it.
Did you ever decide, hey, I can't sleep here, and go try to sleep with mom or dad, or sleep on the couch?
Maybe it was like a nightmare or something. I would do
Did you tell Mom or Dad about the nail ghosts?
I don't know. I don't remember.
And one of the things I was wondering was, what was their reaction to your fear of the nail ghosts? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I don't know if I told them.
James also told Dr. Reed that he was afraid of the dark. Okay, back to the story. At some point when James was a teenager, his parents sought out family therapy, as they must have noticed struggles taking place that were out of their control.
There were times in your life when I think your parents took you to somebody to talk about things, right? I can think of a couple. Maybe they're not quite what we're talking about. Do you remember those times?
Yeah, with another therapist.
Okay.
I just ended up not saying much.
That's interesting. Your folks apparently thought that you were hurting inside, that there was something.
I don't know if it was because of me or it was just family therapy.
So, and we're talking now about the fellow named Mel.
Yeah, Mel.
Yeah. What was it that got you all to see Mel?
Oh, I think it was my mom's decision. I don't know what made her decided to take us to family therapy.
You were pretty young at that time, am I right?
Teens.
Oh, you were in your teens. Okay. So you likely had some idea of why she wanted the family to go see Mel. What do you suppose it was?
Maybe build a stronger, more connected relationship with each other.
Was there something that wasn't strong and wasn't connected in the family at that time?
Not really, no.
Then why do you suppose she thought that needed improving?
See, I don't know why she did it.
When you went to see Mel, what happened in those sessions?
I don't remember.
As he grew into his later teen years, James attended Westview High School, where he would ultimately graduate in 2006. It seems as though at this point in his life, James was able to make and keep friends. He later reported that his high school experience was pretty normal, and that he typically enjoyed his time in school.
In high school, social life?
Yeah, go out with my friends and do stuff.
When you say go out with your friends, what friends, how many, where'd you go? I'm a curious person.
My friends were in high school, and I made my friends in middle school, and they continued on in high school.
Okay, so they traveled with you to the high school?
Yeah.
Males, females, mixture?
Mostly males.
What'd you guys like to do?
Play video games.
Any particular video games you liked?
StarCraft.
I'm trying to think what the video games were at that time. I don't remember specifically what it was about.
It's a real-time strategy.
Okay. Athletics of interest to you? Were they?
Yeah, I was in cross country and I played JV soccer.
Okay.
Though he described himself as shy, quiet, and a loner, James later recalled that he was never explicitly made fun of for any of these traits. He did say, however, that he sometimes overheard people talking about him, wondering why he acted a certain way. James expressed that this was because he didn't know how to join in on conversations at times, so he would instead just freeze up. In a later interview with Dr. Reed, James spoke about violent thoughts that would manifest in these uncomfortable social situations.
Here's an odd question. In the freezing as a grown-up, would you ever have fantasies or thoughts or pictures in your mind of some of the monsters from childhood or any kind of monster? If you're freezing, say, in a social situation.
I would have like violent images.
Violent images.
Yeah.
Tell me about them.
Things like saws going against the other people.
Like what?
What do you mean?
You said violent images and thoughts going against the other people. And I don't know what you mean by it.
Like a saw, like sawing them, or like them getting their heads cut off or something.
Okay. Sawing them or getting their heads cut off. Tell me more about those images in your mind when you're frozen.
They just pop up randomly.
Would they pop up randomly, say, when you're older in the grad school, or is it much younger?
Since like high school on.
Let's take that fantasy to some end, some maybe ridiculous end. A saw pops up. What happens then in the fantasy?
It just like chops off a limb.
What kind of saw? Who's holding the saw? What happens next?
It's just kind of like a floating saw. And then once it happens, then it's like, then there's no more, it's done.
It's done. Is the saw dangerous to you or dangerous to the other person?
The other person.
So the saw's your friend, your ally. Does that make
I
sense?
wouldn't put it like that, no.
You wouldn't put it like that. Okay, thank you for correcting that. Because my thoughts don't have to be your thoughts. Okay. The saw just kind of appears and something happens to the other person.
Yeah.
And then it ends. And what happens next?
Then I'm either still frozen or have come up with a response or something.
At the end of high school, James applied to and was accepted into an internship, where his supervisor described him as being oddly stubborn. James never ended up finishing his project during the internship. After graduation, James moved on to higher education and got his undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree in neuroscience in 2010 from the University of California, Riverside. He reportedly finished school with highest honors, graduating in the top 1% of his class, with a 3.949 grade point average. James later explained that he had no issues of any kind in this stage of his life.
Did you have any difficulties that you remember in college, those undergraduate years?
No, it's pretty smooth sailing.
Academic difficulties, social difficulties, work difficulties, ceiling fell in on your head. Any difficulties you can think of?
No, it was pretty straightforward.
The only thing he mentioned is that he was romantically interested in a fellow classmate and friend of his, but he felt that she did not reciprocate the feelings. James did say that he didn't try very hard with her and never actually asked her out. He also said that there were cultural differences that made a relationship between the two unlikely to occur. He also spoke about a time in the past that he was a camp counselor and that he had a romantic interest with another one of the counselors. This relationship also never really went anywhere, despite his claims that they went on a few dates. James again described himself as shy, so he found participating at the camp to be quite stressful, since there was so much social interaction. James also volunteered with a group that would take trips down to Tijuana, Mexico, every 3 or so months to visit and do activities with children in orphanages. He also reportedly volunteered once in a great while to do some gardening for his mother's church. Speaking of organized religion, when James was young, he and his family would attend church together, but as he got older, he stopped going as much. Despite him being more active with others, he still harbored very weak social skills and continued to struggle fitting in for the most part. In 2010, James was employed at a pill and capsule coating factory in California for about 3 months. His fellow co-workers later recalled that he wasn't a very social person. One of them even remembered a time that James was in a daze, staring at a blank wall. When they asked if he was all right, James apparently would not verbally communicate, and instead only quickly glanced at his co-worker while smirking. James soon decided to further his education and sought to enroll as a PhD student in neuroscience. For this degree, though he was accepted into multiple universities, James decided to move to Aurora, Colorado, in order to attend the University of Colorado. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a building in which many other students studying for medical degrees lived. In October of 2011, James actually got into a relationship with a fellow student, a woman named Gargi Dada. Their first date was to a horror film festival that took place in Colorado's capital city, Denver. After this initial date, the two saw each other at least once a week. During the following February, on Valentine's Day, the two of them had a nice dinner at James's apartment before watching Netflix together. Their relationship ended before the month was over, because Gargi reportedly only wanted a casual relationship and didn't see a future with James. He reportedly told Gargi that he loved her, to which she responded that she wasn't in love with him. She later stated, quote, "I think he liked me more than I liked him," unquote. Some sources state that the two continued a sexual relationship for a while, but this also ended not too long after. James, in an interview with Dr. Reed years later, admitted that when he and Gargi broke up, he sunk into depression. He also touches on his homicidal thoughts during this conversation.
Tell me about the depressed.
Because I broke up with my girlfriend.
That was a little later. Was that in March? Am I remembering that right? When did you break up with Gargi?
I don't remember the exact month. It was early 2012.
Okay. But the important thing is you said pretty depressed. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I didn't have like my normal drive to finish things and succeed.
What's it like to be that depressed? Didn't have your normal drive. What else?
Kind of stuck in a rut.
What do you mean?
It was hard to get up and do things.
At the deepest of the depressions, did you think about hurting yourself or killing yourself?
No.
Any other time in the depressions did you think about hurting yourself or killing yourself?
No.
How about hurting or killing other people?
Yeah, I kind of transferred it into kind of homicidal.
Why do you say transfer?
Because like depression is normally suicidal, so I kind of transferred my suicidal thoughts into homicidal.
Is that word transferred, is that something that came out of you or out of some reading or from somebody else?
That's just my own view.
Your own view, okay. Tell me about what you were thinking about hurting other people or killing other people.
Oh, it's the same things as when I would freeze, kind of homicidal thoughts.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you would freeze, there were particular people around who were the object of the saw or the
Right.
thoughts, is that right? When
It
you
was just more abstract with the other.
Okay.
Near the beginning of 2012, James met with a social worker, a woman named Margaret Roth. She wrote a summary of their meeting, quote, "Mr. Holmes comes in because of anxiety around people and public speaking. He has problems concentrating, eats okay, does not have crying spells, and does not have thoughts of suicide. He has shortness of breath. He has been in a relationship for 4 months with a girlfriend, and she does not want a long-term relationship. He is not anxious when he is home alone, but has problems taking the initiative. He says that both parents are neurotic, and he cannot trust others. He has trichotillomania and has to walk right after eating. When I asked him about other symptoms, he said he did not want to say as I would have to report him. He says he wants to kill other people, but no one in particular, and has never done anything to harm others. He has no medical problems and will drink a 6-pack of beer at a party. It was very hard to interview him as he would just stare and take a long time to answer. He said it was very hard to come in, unquote. Knowing she was not the best equipped to deal with the situation, Margaret referred James to someone more experienced to handle his needs, a psychiatrist named Dr. Lynn Fenton. Margaret wrote to Dr. Fenton, quote, "I saw a student late Friday who I would hope you would be able to see, and soon if possible. He is the most anxious guy I have seen and has symptoms of OCD. But most concerning is that he has thoughts of killing people, though I do not think he is dangerous. He said he did not want to tell me everything he was experiencing, as I might have to report. The reason I think it might be best for you to see him, as I think it might be best to keep him in our system. What do you think?" Unquote. Well, Dr. Fenton did agree to see James and set up a meeting with him. In their first meeting, James admitted that his recent breakup contributed to his increasing state of violent depression. He also apparently spoke to the doctor about his growing homicidal ideation. As a result of the meeting, Dr. Fenton prescribed him both Zoloft and clonazepam to treat his apparent symptoms of depression and OCD. This decision is heavily debated. During the time he was seeking professional help, James was still in contact with his ex-girlfriend, Gargi. Like stated before, they might have still been engaging in sexual activity together. On March 25, 2012, she and James were having a conversation that quickly turned worrisome. James wrote, "I am debating whether to sleep, Skyrim, or read." Gargi said, "Skyrim, slay those damn dragons." James then responded with, "I would and all, but it probably won't be very useful for the future." Gargi asked, "How much is reading or sleeping going to help?" He said, "More than video games, I suppose." She replied, "It's something fun that you like to do. Go ahead and do it. Fuck the future for once. Do what you feel like doing. It's a Sunday afternoon." James then said, "Well, what I feel like doing is evil, so can't do that." She wrote back, "What do you feel like doing?" He responded, "Video games are the next best thing through escapism." Gargi asked, "What is so evil that you want to do?" James replied, "Kill people, of course. That is why I live in the future." She said, "Killing people is too much effort. You'll end up locked up. Most people are not worth what might happen to you because of the act." He responded, "That's why you kill many people." She sent, "Even then, at least personally, I'm selfish and have too much of an idea of self-importance. Most people aren't worth jack shit. Even if you go postal, what's it worth? What do you gain?" James replied, "There's no way to do it and not get caught. But the only way justice can be served is by taking away your time or life." Gargi asked, "Why do you care so much about justice?" He replied, "If you wait to kill until the end of your life, then there is nothing to lose." She asked, "But why would you want to kill? As in, why would you decide this is the end? And kill when you could live more, experience more things? Why would those people be worth ending your own life?" James said, "It's the end then, though. No more experiences." The conversation cut off after Gargi said, "Why? How do you decide that is the end?" These messages may be the first mention of James's demented theory of human capital, which I will touch on a bit later in the video. In James's later trial, Gargi testified regarding this conversation.
And then you get into a discussion where the defendant brings up to you that what he wants to do is evil. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now, at the time that he references that in the chat, and we'll get to see that, what are you thinking?
Initially, I was thinking he was just messing with me. He was joking.
And then throughout the conversation, does that sense that you have change over time?
Yes, he starts talking about justice. At that point, I start thinking maybe he's serious, but it seemed very philosophical and discussion-wise.
And do you end up over the course of this chat engaging with him in sort of a philosophical back and forth?
Yes.
Now, at some point during this conversation, do you express to him, look, I don't track what you're saying about how this philosophy works?
Yes.
All right. And it goes on here for a few pages that we're going to see. But then, do you recall how this chat ends as you're going back? And by the way, do you have any sense that this is imminent or there's a plan in place or anything like that?
No, not at all. This was the first and the only time he had mentioned something like that, and it seemed very philosophical.
It was ultimately in April of 2012 that James finally cut contact with Gargi, stating that he can't, quote, just be friends, unquote. On the 19th, he created a dating profile in which he would later write, quote, will you visit me in prison, unquote. It's also reported that James had solicited sex workers sometime during the months prior to his attack. One even apparently stated that she had absolutely no issues with him, and that he was a nice guy. It was also this month that James met a new girl named Hillary Allen, and he developed a crush on her. They went on a hike on April 25th, but she later testified that she didn't want James to think it was a date. As far as I can tell, this relationship really didn't go anywhere, though the two of them did stay friends for a while. It seems as though it was around early May of 2012 when James became serious about a devastating plan that would leave a dozen people dead and many more injured. He began to amass a collection of armor, weapons, and bomb-making supplies to fulfill his scheme. His first purchase consisted of 2 tear gas canisters, which he bought from an online retailer. It was later that month that he bought his first firearm, a .40 caliber Glock pistol. A few days later, he purchased a Remington pump-action shotgun, as well as ammunition for both firearms. After these purchases, James acquired 2 pairs of handcuffs, which were going to be used to lock a set of double doors. He also bought a first aid kit and road stars, which he got in anticipation of a car chase, so he could puncture the police's tires. James's academic performance had diminished quite a bit by this time. In early June of 2012, only 3 days after miserably failing an important oral exam, James dropped out of his university altogether, with no apparent explanation. It's reported that it was this same day that he purchased a Smith & Wesson semi-automatic rifle, along with a slew of other things including ammunition, gunslings, and a case for one of the firearms. Throughout this time, James was continuing his sessions with Dr. Fenton. Another psychiatrist, a man named Dr. Robert Feinstein, sat in on Dr. Fenton's last 2 meetings with James, and also listened as he said he wanted to kill people. It's important to note that according to them, James never revealed that he was in the process of purchasing and collecting a stockpile of weapons. James told both doctors that he had to discontinue their sessions due to him losing insurance. Despite their reassurances that they would find a way to help him, he declined the offer. The 7th session with Dr. Fenton was the last time she met with him. She stated that their last session together was on June 11th, 2012. Dr. Fenton was very concerned about James and opted to contact his mother to ask if this behavior of his was normal, to which she apparently replied that she had been concerned about James his entire life. His mother, Arlene, later claimed in court that Dr. Fenton did not once express that her son, James, was having homicidal thoughts.
Did she ever tell you she had concerns because he had expressed homicidal ideation?
No, never.
Do you wish she had?
Of course I do. Of course. We wouldn't be sitting here if she had told me that.
Would you have been out here the next day?
I would have been crawling on all fours to get to him. He's never said that he wanted to kill people. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell me.
Dr. Fenton had a duty to report James's frightening threats, so she contacted a campus police officer, Lynn Witten, to make her concerns known. She requested a background check to be performed on him, which apparently came back clean. As a result of this, Officer Witten possibly deactivated James's keycard access to parts of the campus. However, some sources state that his keycard access was restricted simply because he was no longer attending the school. It's also reported that Dr. Fenton expressed her concerns about James to the campus's threat assessment team. As a result of this, again, really nothing was done. Since he had already left the school, they felt as though they had no control over the situation. What's important to know about this is that no one actually followed up with the reports or made the effort to check up on James. All three of the professionals who met with him during his time at the University of Colorado agreed that while his statements were definitely concerning, there apparently wasn't enough evidence to place him on a psychiatric hold. According to Dr. Fenton in the later trial, this was because while he indeed talked about having homicidal thoughts, he never made the intention or exact plans to kill others clear to them. It's extremely unfortunate that despite him divulging his desire to kill others with numerous people, they either didn't take it seriously, so they didn't report it, or were seemingly not allowed to do anything about it. Dr. Fenton did talk with the officer, but unfortunately nothing past doing the background check and potential restricted access was done. After their sessions ceased, Dr. Fenton reported that she received threatening texts and emails from James. However, no source that I found listed the exact contents of these messages. Over the next month or so, James continued purchasing many other items to complete his dangerous collection. In mid-June, he bought a 100-round drum magazine for the AR-15, ammunition for all three firearms, hearing protection, and a green laser to attach to one of the guns. Within the next 4 days, he purchased more bullets, another laser sight, targets, target stands, and a pistol holster. It was in late June that James started to gather his protective gear. He bought a ballistic helmet online and also went through another site to purchase over 2,000 pistol rounds, over 2,000 rifle rounds, and also 25 shotgun shells. His first purchase in July took place on the first day of the month. This is when he bought some plastic target practice ammunition and also bought a scope for his rifle. The next day, James ordered a ton of body armor for his neck, arms, torso, groin, and legs. The day after that, James made the first purchase for his future plan to construct homemade explosives and incendiaries, which was a launch control system, usually used for model rockets, as well as fuses, and other similar items. On July 6th, he bought another .40 caliber Glock, but also got more targets, more ammunition, gun oil and cleaner, and also smokeless gunpowder. And finally, in the middle of July, James acquired various chemicals and a mortar and pestle. In all, James purchased 4 firearms, numerous accessories for the guns, over 6,000 rounds of ammunition, several pieces of body armor, and various supplies to make homemade explosive and incendiary devices. From these purchases, it's beyond clear that James had the worst intentions and was planning for something massive. It isn't explicitly stated when, but James later admitted that he began having intrusive thoughts about firearms around this time.
How about the intrusive thoughts? Which intrusive thoughts?
The violent ones.
Okay. Any intrusive thoughts that you haven't mentioned? The saw, the nuclear winter? What else?
Ultimately, the guns.
What were the intrusive thoughts about the guns?
That I should shoot as many people as possible.
How do you feel as you tell me that? Your voice dropped just a little bit.
Not good.
Make you nervous to talk about it, or what's the feeling?
Makes me nervous.
It's unclear when, but at some point, James began sketching and jotting down concerning notes for his plan in a journal. I will not be talking about every single page, because there are a ton, with many of them being confusing and a little difficult to read at times. I do encourage you to follow the link in the description if you want to see the whole thing for yourself, though. The journal starts out with, quote, "The questions. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of death?" The journal's contents quickly turn into ramblings focused on mental illness, violence, and death. This is where James's theory of human capital pops back up. Under the heading, Insights into the Mind of Madness, James drew many stick figures, along with numerous equations scattered about. It seems as though in this section, James is trying to figure out how the value of human life transfers after death. He starts off by allocating the value of 1 to each person. Then he asks himself, if a person kills 10 others, is the killer's value still considered to be 1? Would it now be 11, or possibly -9? He wrote, quote, "Can a person have both no value and be ultimately good and or ultimately evil? Unknown. Why does the value of a person even matter?" A later part of the journal reads, quote, "Life's fallback solution to all problems, death." It continues, quote, "When mankind can't find truth, untruth is converted to truth via violence." Another section is titled, "Symptoms Attributed to Self-Diagnosis." I'll put the full pages on screen for you to read, as I'm not going to include it all. It was here that he listed a slew of ailments he was reportedly suffering from, and a description of each. Some of the symptoms read, quote, "Catatonia, excessive fatigue, isolationism, avoid social interactions, concern with nose, concern with ears, concern with eyes, concern with cock, difficulty in concentrating or focusing on anything longer than 15 minutes, and hair pulling." James used 8 pages of his journal to jot down the question, why, hundreds of times. After a ton of rambling, much of which I did not include, James moved on to planning out his attack. He starts off the page with, quote, "Case the place." He then wrote, quote, "Targets, random. The cruel twists of fate are unkind to the misfortunate." James then listed many ways he could carry out an attack, all of which were ruled out as a possibility. He wrote, quote, "Method, bombs, too regulated and suspicious. Biological warfare, too impatient, requires extensive knowledge, chemicals and equipment. Serial murder, too personal, too much evidence, easily caught, few kills." Finally, he reached an idea that he was satisfied with, which read, quote, "Mass murder or spree, maximum casualties, easily performed with firearms, although primitive in nature. No fear of consequences. Being caught, 99% certain." He then debated the venue he would choose to commit his mass spree at, quote, "Airport or movie theater. Airport, substantial security. Too much of a terrorist history. Terrorism isn't the message. The message is there is no message. Most fools will misinterpret correlation for causation, namely relationship and work failure as causes. Both were expediting catalysts, not the reason. The causation being my state of mind for the past 15 years. With the airport idea now ruled out as an option, a movie theater was the only other choice. James then began planning the little details and wrote, quote, "The movie theater, Cinemark 16, isolated, proximal, large. What better place to case than that of an inconspicuous entertainment facility?" On the same page, James drew a map of the area, including the theater itself, the streets surrounding it, and the mall nearby. He also wrote, quote, "South side of Theater Optimal, 15 screens." He also drew diagrams of many of the individual theaters' layouts, listing their features, including number of exits, amount of space, what would be his visibility inside, and other info alongside them. After identifying that Theater 10 and 12 would be the best to target, James further debated on which to choose, weighing the pros and cons between them. With the handcuffs that he had previously purchased, James wanted to lock the double-door entrance in order to increase the casualty count. He also made notes about where he could park his car relative to the theater, and how he could re-enter the theater after gathering his equipment. Sometime after writing these notes, James decided to abandon the plans to target either Theater 10 or 12, and instead set his sights on Theater 9. Weirdly, I did not find any mention of plans to attack Theater 9 in his writings. I'm not sure if this means he changed his mind at the last minute, if he had made this decision outside of the journal, or if the pages detailing his new plan were just not made public. But the most important thing to know is that he did end up intentionally targeting Theater 9. James did note that the police department was nearby, and that the estimated response time would be about 3 minutes. After detailing his plans, James wrote a long section including multiple topics. I'll throw the pages on screen for you to read, since it's a lot. He wrote about his past psychiatrists and therapists and his experience with them. He also touches on his weapons and explosive supplies. One sentence out of this section reads, quote, "Decided to dedicate life to killing others so that I could live." A part of the ending paragraph reads, quote, "Prevent building false sense of rapport, speak truthfully, and deflect incriminating questions." Oddly, they don't pursue or delve further into harmful omissions. The final few sentences read, quote, "No consequence, no fear, alone, isolated, no work for distractions, no reason to seek self-actualization, embrace the hatred, a dark night rises." James still had a ton of prepping to finish up before he acted out his plan. He dyed his hair orange, visited the proposed movie theater numerous times to scout it out, wrote more in his journal, took photos of his gear, constructed multiple explosive and incendiary devices, and took several photos of himself posing with various items, including his weapons and armor. Shortly before the day of his massacre came, James rigged his apartment using the homemade explosives and incendiaries. This was in preparation of when the police would later enter his home. I will be going over this specific section of the case in greater detail after the events of the shooting itself, so please make sure to stick around. Before his attack, spanning across multiple days in July, James went online and purchased 3 tickets for the upcoming, highly anticipated movie, titled The Dark Knight Rises.
The record indicates that your phone was scanned 3 times. Does that make sense?
I bought in 3 tickets.
Okay. Any particular reason you bought 3 tickets?
I was trying to get into Theater 9, and the tickets I bought were Theater 8. So I bought multiple tickets over different days to try and get the ticket to Theater 9.
Again, this would be the venue he chose to enact his sick and demented plan on. Up until the attack, James was living life as normal. He was grocery shopping, and even made sure to pay his rent on time. On the afternoon of Thursday, July 19th, 2012, after completing his entries, James packaged his journal up and mailed it to the University of Colorado, specifically to his former psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton. In this package, James also included $400 worth of partially burned $20 bills. The package was sent out just hours before his violent plan was set into motion. Despite reaching the university, the package was never actually delivered to Dr. Fenton. Instead, it was placed in the mailroom and forgotten about until well after the attack took place. I wonder what could have been done if someone had laid eyes on these disturbing writings. Now let's move on to the reason that James Holmes became a household name. Of course, I will now be referring to him by his last name. On the night of July 19th, and into the early morning of July 20th, 2012, many moviegoers were ecstatic to catch the midnight premiere of the newest movie in the Batman trilogy. With it being such a popular series, it isn't surprising to learn that the show was absolutely packed, with about 400 attendees set to be in Theater 9 alone, some even dressed up in costumes. As Batman fans flocked into the Century 16 Theater in Aurora, Colorado, they were completely unaware that someone with a sinister plan was among them, and that their lives would forever be changed that night. Backing up a bit, on the drive to the theater, Holmes later said that he thought the FBI was already onto him and was going to put an end to his plot before it even began.
I said on the drive over, I thought the FBI would stop so I wouldn't have to do it, stop me.
Okay. Did you think they had you under surveillance?
Yeah.
What led you to think that?
Just that I was going to commit a crime.
Do you think maybe you hoped they had you under surveillance?
Yeah, a little bit.
Can you expand on that? That a little bit of you may have hoped that they were surveilling you.
Yeah, so they could have done the right thing.
Done the right thing, meaning?
Locked me away before I did it.
Without being stopped, Holmes pulled into the parking lot and opted to park his car on the back side of the building. On surveillance footage, he is seen entering the movie theater through the front entrance and holding the door open for a couple. He then retrieved his ticket for the movie. As stated before, Holmes purchased multiple tickets in order to get into the exact theater he wanted. However, he later revealed that this plan of his didn't end up working out.
And one of them did come up Theater 9.
No, they were all Theater 8. So I went to the concession stand, which was on the Theater 9 side, and then went to Theater 9.
Okay. So you just mostly, nobody had to check that, or nobody checked which theater you were going to?
Once you do the check at the front to see if you have a ticket, then they tell you where it is and you can go there. But I went to the concession stand.
Instead of heading to the theater designated on his ticket, Holmes made his way to his desired one anyway, Theater 9. He joined the crowd pouring into the theater, though there were already a ton of people sitting in their seats when he arrived. Holmes opted to sit in the very front right side, near the emergency exit, and sat there for about a minute. He later described the environment to Dr. Reed.
What was on the screen when you went in?
I didn't see, I'd imagine just previews.
Do you recall specifically that there was something on the screen, but you just don't?
There was
remember?
Advertisements playing.
Okay. What else did you see in the theater when you first went in?
Well, it's just an aisle way.
I'm sorry?
It's just an aisle way to the stands. And I looked back in the stands and saw that they were all full.
Shortly after the movie began, Holmes feigned a phone call, got up from his seat, and headed for the emergency exit, propping it open with a tablecloth clamp as he left the building. This would be his way back in, enabling him to avoid attracting any attention when he re-entered. Some patrons sitting in their seats did actually notice as Holmes exited the theater, though none of them thought too much about it at the time. He then made his way to his car, climbed in, and began the task of donning a full set of body armor. He had tinted windows and had placed a sun shield on the car's windshield to conceal his actions while he prepared for his next move. In the car, Holmes equipped himself with the long list of protective gear that he had purchased previously, including a gas mask. At some point during the process of getting ready, Holmes placed a last-minute call to a crisis hotline.
Good evening, University of Aurora Hospital. This is Ann. How may I help you?
At what point did you call the behavioral health hotline, or a hotline of some kind?
Like halfway through gearing up.
From the car then?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was something that happened in the car. If you can, I'd like to pretty much hear everything. I want to hear the whole
I
story.
called him, but I couldn't hear anybody on the other line.
What led you to make that call?
Just one last chance to see if I should turn back or not.
How big was the part of you that was hoping for that last chance?
It was overruled by completing the...
And we know that it was overruled. It was. But how big was it to be overruled?
Not very big.
Enough to make you dial the phone.
Yeah.
Was the number already in your phone? How did you?
Yeah, I saved it in my phone.
Okay. You'd saved it from a previous visit or a sign on the wall at the office? Or how did you have that number?
The website, I believe.
May I ask when you went to the website and got the number?
I don't remember. It was before that day, though.
You think it was weeks before that day, or within the week?
Maybe within a week.
If you remember, why did you go to their website?
To get that number.
And the website is the website for?
Student mental health.
Okay. Were you thinking anything else as you went to the website other than, I'd like to have the number in my phone?
No.
Were you thinking why you might want to have the number in your phone?
In case I wanted to stop the process.
Okay. Had you ever dialed that number before?
No.
And what happened when you dialed it?
I just didn't hear anything.
Did you hear the phone ringing at the other end?
No.
Really? It was just dead, or I don't understand.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything for 9 seconds, and then it hung up.
Then you hung up, or they hung up, or it hung up?
It hung up. I'm not sure.
What do you think would have happened if somebody had answered?
I don't know.
What do you think?
I might have talked to him.
What might you have said?
Told them the situation.
I'm sorry?
Told them the situation.
So you might have told them where you were and what was going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think might have happened then?
They would have tried to convince me not to.
Okay. What might they have said?
I don't know.
Do you think they would have been successful?
No, I think it would have been overruled at the beginning.
With apparently not hearing the person answer the phone, his mind was now unfortunately set. It was during this time that Holmes put his earbuds in and began playing techno music. He grabbed his slew of weapons, including a folding knife, 2 tear gas canisters, his .40 caliber Glock pistol equipped with a laser sight, his AR-15, and his 12-gauge shotgun. He also carried a large amount of ammunition on him. He recalled doing all of this in a later interview.
So you go out through some sort of exit corridor to the outside exit door, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what happened?
Then I went to put the stuff on and get all the weapons ready.
Tell me about that process. What did you do, or how did that work?
Well, I previously loaded all the magazines into the weapons to have them ready to fire. I just put on the clothes, the kind of arm guard, the coat with the ballistic proof.
Did you do all that in the car, or did you do it outside the car?
In the car.
Must have been pretty cramped.
Yes, it was. It took a little bit.
Holmes had another .40 caliber Glock that he would end up leaving in the car. At some point while Holmes was gearing up, one of the movie theater employees came out to throw trash in the dumpster to the left of his car.
Then what happened?
Then an employee came out to the dumpster and threw something away, but I had the tinted windows and the sunshade up, so they didn't see me. But I heard them.
But
I heard them.
You heard them come out?
Yeah.
What did you think about when they came out?
If they're going to interrupt the process or not. But they didn't. They just went back inside the theater after they threw the trash away.
If they had somehow interrupted the process, what would have happened?
I had a handgun in my passenger door side that I could have used.
Okay. Were you prepared to do that if necessary?
Yeah.
After gathering all of these items, putting on all of his gear, and placing the call to the crisis hotline, and waiting for the employee to leave, Holmes stepped out of his vehicle, armed and ready. He reportedly dropped one of his 2 tear gas canisters and briefly attempted to look for it, to no avail.
How'd you feel when something dropped that sounds like an unexpected thing happening? What thoughts or feelings did that bring up as you were trying to carry out the mission?
It didn't bring up any feelings. Just that I needed to find it.
And you needed to find it because?
For crowd control.
No sense of panic or
No.
something's gone wrong?
No, nothing like that.
All right. Thank you.
He later recalled that it was at this time that he, again, thought the FBI was waiting outside and were going to come and arrest him on the spot. Because of this, he made his way towards the door leading back into the theater, but ducked into a slightly hidden walkway, still outside of the building, where he could keep himself concealed. It was here that he lingered for a minute or two. Then, Holmes approached the emergency door that he had propped open previously. He then slipped in just as quick as he had left earlier. It was now between 15 and 20 minutes after the movie began. The crowded theater was loud, with the movie's sound booming from the speakers. Holmes pulled the pin on the one remaining tear gas canister in his possession.
The canister's been opened.
Right.
At that point, are you on autopilot or not yet?
At that point, I'm on autopilot.
Some people who are in experiences like that, for one reason or another, are very sensitive to what's going on around them, very aware of little things and big things.
No, I wasn't like that.
Wasn't like that?
No.
How about vision? How well could you see at that point going in from the door?
I couldn't see very well at all.
Because?
Because there were scratches in the gas mask, and it was brighter outside than it was inside.
Okay.
After pulling the pin, Holmes threw the canister clear across the room, with it landing somewhere on the left side, if looking at the screen, of the upper section of seating. I'm going to be sharing some of the victims' testimonies throughout talking about the events of the shooting, but due to the sheer amount of them, I obviously can't include them all. Among a few others, a man named Jonathan Blunk instinctively pushed his girlfriend Jansen to the ground and covered her body with his, shielding her from the assault. Jansen later testified about her experience.
For this jury here, would you point to the seats where you and Jonathan Blunk were sitting?
Yes. Like, right here.
Okay. And you're pointing to these. They're not on the end. They're two in from the right end as you face towards the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember who was sitting where?
Yeah, I was in this seat, and John was in this seat.
Jonathan Blunk was to your left
Yes.
as you face the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, point to where you remember seeing the canister thrown from.
Up here.
You said up on the stand that you didn't see a person at first. Did you ultimately see someone down there?
Yes.
Describe for us what you saw.
Well, you could just see the outline of someone, because only when there were flashes of light.
We'll talk about the flashes of light in a minute. This canister that's thrown, do you have some sense of where it landed?
I thought it landed somewhere back here because it kind of flew over our heads. I watched it.
Okay, and you've just demonstrated with your head watching it go from the right to the left back?
Uh-huh.
Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. You said it was smoking the whole time.
Yes.
What kind of smoke? Like cigarette smoke?
Well, I am not very familiar with, like gun smoke, but it smelled like fireworks, like gunpowder stuff.
This is a good time to ask you this. At the time that you see this canister thrown with the smoke coming out of it, are you scared?
Objection 401, 403.
Overruled.
No, I was confused. I thought it was a prank. I thought it was fireworks.
Now, your voice trailed off there at the end, so let me loop that back in. You said you thought it was a prank. What do you mean?
I thought teenagers were throwing fireworks in the movie theater. I kind of shook my head, like, oh, I can't believe teenagers are throwing fireworks.
Did Jonathan react the same way?
No, he did not.
What did he do?
He immediately grabbed me and said, Jansen, he pushed me down behind the seats in front of us and said, Jansen, we have to get down and stay down.
Now tell this jury with your finger, show them, where did he push you down to in there?
He pushed me right here to begin with, and then immediately after that started pushing me underneath the seats. So I was laying flat underneath the seats, and he was on my left side.
Now, are these seats that typically flip up, when you get out of them?
Yes.
And you said he was trying to shove you underneath them?
Yes.
Was he successful?
I feel like he was, yes.
Like Jansen, many people in the theater thought that the object thrown across the room was part of a prank. However, the highly irritating fog from the tear gas canister quickly began to spread through the air, almost instantly affecting the 400 people in the theater. This startled many of the moviegoers before their eyes, noses, and mouths began to burn, and it became hard to breathe. Some were too stunned to move, others immediately got to the ground, taking cover, and some instantly began fleeing the theater. While those in the theater were stunned by the sudden and completely unexpected gas, Holmes moved on with the next part of his plan. He advanced into the room slightly, shotgun in hand, and saw as people in the back corner began to get up in panic. He knew they saw him, so he aimed the firearm in their direction and discharged it. He also shot into the crowd, later stating that he didn't really know exactly where he was aiming.
So you shot in that direction. Do you know whether you hit anything?
I heard a scream.
You heard a scream?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened next?
And I shot all my shotgun rounds and tossed it on the floor.
Slow down a little, because I want to kind of each step, if you don't mind. You shot how many times toward the folks in the upper left?
I think the shotgun held 5 or 6 shells. So I shot all 6 of them.
Emptied in that direction, okay. Go ahead, please.
I didn't know what, just in the direction of the people. I don't remember after the back corner where I fired them.
Okay.
But then I threw the gun down and switched to the AR-15.
Very sadly, while shielding his girlfriend Jansen from the attack, Jonathan was shot and killed, but she did thankfully end up surviving. As sad as it is, I am glad that his sacrifice wasn't for nothing. A man who was in the theater, Jameson Taves, was with his pregnant girlfriend Ashley, her 6-year-old daughter Veronica, and 2 other young girls. Jameson later testified in court about what he recalled from the beginning of the attack and onward.
All right, Mr. Taves, if you could kind of stand back here with me and please show the jury where you were seated.
I believe I was seated in this row here in the middle.
And could you please show the jury what seat you were in and what seat everyone else was in that you were with?
I was approximately, if we were all centered, I was on the far left, and then and Ashley was next to me, followed by Veronica, Kaylin, and Haley.
All right. What happened while you were waiting for the movie to begin?
Like I said, I took the kids to the arcade.
Objection to relevance and asked and answered.
And after you got back from the arcade? So what happened in the theater after you got back from the arcade?
Same objection to relevance.
I had worked all day, so I actually fell asleep before the movie started. Ashley woke me up right when it was starting. Not so I don't know exactly, if anything happened before the movie started. But I was pretty tired that day because I started work at 6 in the morning, and it was a midnight show. So,
what do you remember after you woke up?
I was slightly paying attention to the movie, and then I heard someone scream, pardon my language, "What the hell is that?" And at the same moment I noticed something flying through the air, which turned out to be a gas canister. It flew from the front right of the theater by the exit door over my head, and I thought it landed about midway up on the steps. and I was looking over there when all of a sudden I'm stunned by something, and I look down and there's blood all over me.
Jameson had just been hit in the head by one of Holmes's shotgun rounds. Miraculously, his wound wasn't fatal. Another survivor, Stephen Barton, later testified about the moment he was injured.
About 20 minutes into the movie itself, I would say, I remember seeing an object basically pass through my line of sight when I was looking at the screen, and it made this like hissing noise, and I had no idea what it was, but it landed somewhere around here, and as soon as it landed, I remember seeing up here by the emergency exit this flashing light and this very loud noise, like a booming noise, and it sounded to me like fireworks. And so I'm seeing this light. I think it's a prank. I don't really know what's going on. I was very disoriented. But shortly after that, maybe 2 seconds afterwards, I noticed that people were screaming, were getting out of their seats. The room was starting to fill with smoke. And about that same time, I just instinctively held my hands in front of my face. And in that same moment, I felt this immense pressure on my chest and basically my whole upper body. And I fell forward in front of my seat.
Could you describe for the jury how your body was positioned when you fell forward in your seats?
So I just, fell into the, I guess you'd call it a row in front of the seats. And I think I fell on my knees, but I think I then sat backwards, so I was just sitting in front of my seat.
Right. What do you recall happening after that?
Well, the first thing I remember is that I couldn't feel my left arm at all. It was suddenly completely numb, and I actually thought that it had been blown off or something, and I actually had to look at it to confirm that it was still attached to my body. And the other thing I remember more than anything was that my neck was just swelling with blood, and it was bleeding very profusely. And I knew that I had been shot, but I really didn't know the extent of my injuries. I just knew that there was something in my neck. And I was scared to death because I thought, what if my artery has been hit, or, my neck was severely injured. So I just remember sitting there and thinking, this could be it. This might be the end.
Stephen sustained multiple shotgun wounds across his entire upper body. After the first shots, Holmes's mind apparently went blank, and he didn't remember much of what he did afterward. He did, however, recall shooting at a few people in particular.
I don't remember where I shot those ones either, except for like 2 people who tried to run away, and I shot like 3 shots at them.
There were many more people in the theater than the 2 who were trying to run away.
Right.
Did their running away prompt you to shoot them?
It made me kind of focus on them, or divert my attention to them, because I can't have everybody running away from the scene.
Tell me what you mean, I can't have everybody running away.
Well, because then I'm kind of out of control of the situation.
Several calls began to flood into 911 to report this horrific attack. Some from inside the theater, where you can hear gunshots still going off, and some from people who had already escaped.
Aurora 911, where's your emergency? I can't hear you. What address? Theater, Aurora, Colorado. I can't hear you. Give me the address again. There's gunshots. What address? Say it loud.
Arapahoe 911, is this reference to shooting in Aurora?
Yes, ma'am, and I got shot. I got hit.
You were hit?
Yes, I got hit.
Okay, hold on a second. Do not hang up. Sir, do not hang up. I need to bring Aurora on the phone, okay? Do not hang up.
Yes, ma'am. I got hit with something and I'm bleeding a lot.
Sir, hold on a second. I'm going to on the phone, okay? Hold on just a second.
Jameson continued his testimony, including what he remembered from this time.
Okay, I observed after I watched the shooter shoot a few rounds, maybe 2 rounds, towards my left, I looked over and I saw people running down the stairs to the far exit away from the shooter. I saw one person dragging themselves across the floor towards the exit like they were wounded in their leg. I'm not sure exactly why they were dragging their leg. And then I noticed the shooter shooting towards those people.
Jameson, Ashley, and Veronica were all shot by Holmes. Shortly before the shooting began, Ashley had moved Veronica off of her lap and into the seat to the right of her. As being pregnant, it hurt her stomach to have the young child on her lap. Unfortunately, this innocent decision changed everything. Devastatingly, 6-year-old Veronica would be the only person out of the group of 5 to not make it out of the theater alive. After they were shot, Ashley fell on top of Veronica, unable to get off of her. One of the girls who was with the group that night, 13-year-old Kaylin, called 911 after the shots rang out.
Progress or life-threatening emergency. Okay, is this the Century 16's theater shooting? Do you know anybody who's been shot? Okay, who's been shot? Who do you know that's been shot?
My 2 cousins.
Okay, where are they right now?
They're on the floor of the store.
Are they breathing? Ma'am, do you know if they're breathing and do you know if they're conscious?
A woman named Amanda was with her boyfriend, Alex Teeves, and a friend, Craig Enland, that night. She later testified about realizing her boyfriend had been shot and killed.
That I yelled for Alex, and I started shaking his tummy. I just kept shaking him and calling his name, but he wasn't answering me.
And at that point in time, could you see any wounds on Alex?
I looked up and I saw Craig. After that, it was like there was nothing I could see with Alex, but I looked at Craig and I knew something was really wrong when I looked at Craig.
Why did you know something was really wrong when you looked at Craig?
Because his face was it was covered in blood, and I could tell that Alex had been hit in the head because of what else was on his face.
And what else was on Craig's face?
It was sorry.
Okay, take a moment.
The flesh of Alex. I don't know how else.
So after you see Craig and you see that, what do you do?
I didn't want to leave. Craig was reaching his hand out to me and telling me to go, and the people behind me were telling me to go too, and I didn't want to leave him there.
So what'd you do?
I told Craig no at first, and he said, no, we have to go, and so I grabbed Craig's hand, but I grabbed Alex's hand too. I wanted to take him. I wanted to try and take him with me.
Were you able to take him with you?
No. I had to run out with Craig holding his hand, and I had to drop Alex's hand.
Craig also later testified about this time.
At some point, there was a loud and forceful something that hit nearby. It felt like something hit the seat really, really hard. And I saw Alex slump to the ground. Amanda started screaming his name and shaking him. It was about then that obviously I realized what was going on at that point, that there's gunfire, and I don't know whether consciously or subconsciously I knew that Alex was dead and that we had to get out of there. I grabbed Amanda and said, we need to get out of here, and we ran out.
Holmes recalled that some people did get away from him during the shooting, some even making their way past him while carrying a wounded man and leaving through the emergency exit that Holmes had used to regain entry. I'm not sure exactly how close Holmes was to the exit, but judging from his own statements, he remained nearby for the majority of the time. I'm unsure how this group of people, who were likely slow due to carrying someone, were able to escape without being killed, but I'm glad they did. Stephen Barton, one of the wounded who escaped, also testified about this time.
Please tell the jury about what you recall happening after you went through that exit door.
So after I went out that exit, there's a stairway that leads into the lobby, and I remember going down that stairway with a lot of other people, many of whom were covered with blood. And in the lobby, I remember hearing a couple more gunshots and wondering if there was another shooter. But I was just, moving with this whole group of people out into the parking lot.
You didn't see another shooter in the lobby?
No.
Because he was wearing a gas mask, Holmes stated that he just fired into the crowded space randomly and did not use the sights to aim at anything or anyone in particular for the most part. He did admit that there were a few people he specifically targeted, mainly those who were attempting to escape, like the people I just mentioned. When aiming and shooting at the people who were fleeing, some of Holmes's shots ended up passing through the wall and into the adjacent Theater 8, injuring a few people there as well. A woman named Farah Soudani, who was in Theater 9, gave a very disturbing testimony at the later trial, in which she described her very extensive injuries.
For a moment, the pops stopped, and so I got up, was going to try to leave, and then all of a sudden, I felt my side was soaking wet, and I felt it was warm, and I knew that I was hit.
What could you see of your injuries?
I couldn't see anything, but I looked down. At the time I was wearing a light gray t-shirt, and I looked down and I could see just blood just starting to pour from my abdomen. And then when I realized I was hurt, I tried to reach for Mike to get his attention, and then my intestines and my stomach actually fell out, and I had to bend down and actually catch my intestines and push them back in my body with my left arm.
What do you recall happening after you did that?
After I did that, I just laid down and told myself to stay calm. But as I was going down, I said, I'm hit. And then Mike White Jr., it got his attention. And then as I fell to the ground, he comes over to me and said, where are you hit? And I told him my side. And then he just reached over my body, but with his left arm, because his right arm was injured. He reached over with his left arm and started holding in my organs.
Could you tell if you had been shot at any other part of your body at that point in time?
At that point, I couldn't tell.
Okay. What do you recall after Mike was trying to keep your organs in?
He was holding my side, and then he kind of leaned back. He fell back. I could tell he was in pain, and he had been hit. I couldn't tell how bad, though. And then for some reason, I wanted to take my shoes off, so I took my shoe off my right foot, and I lifted up my left leg to take my other shoe off, and I saw that majority of my calf had been filleted off, basically, and it was only hanging on by a piece.
Surveillance footage of the lobby captures the moment that the employees and patrons outside of Theater 9 realized something horrific was taking place. The two cashiers duck in the frame before a stampede of people flee out of the front doors. Not knowing where the threat was coming from, or if they were his next targets, the cashiers attempt to hide behind the counter before abandoning that idea and joining the crowd desperate to escape the violence. Back inside of the theater, Holmes continued his massacre, drowning out the screams and gunshots with the blasting techno music in his ears. He later said that he did not recall hearing any of the gunshots, though he knew it was possible to hear them over the music, as he had experimented with it before. In fact, he stated that he doesn't remember hearing anything whatsoever.
Did the music stop at any point, or did it keep going the whole time?
It was set to play the whole time. I don't know if it did or not, because I wasn't really hearing the music either.
Tell me about that. You weren't really hearing the music either.
Yeah, I don't remember the music.
So even if it had paused or was between beats or between songs, you don't remember things being heard in the course of what happened.
Right, yeah.
Another survivor, a man named Kerry Rotman, later spoke in court about sustaining his injuries.
After Pierce got down, that's when it kind of registered to me, get down, this is actually gunfire. From there, Pierce and I just kind of ducked for cover. I could hear very, very consistent, rapid gunfire at the time. I had half of my body, my lower half of the body, my legs were out in the aisle, with being that first seat in the aisle. Shortly after, the rapid gunfire, crying, just a very frantic, chaotic scene at that point.
And what do you mean by that?
Some people were getting up and trying to get out of there. Other people were ducked down at that point. Other people were hit and crying and screams. Things consistent with being in a situation like that, I would say.
Have you been in a situation like that before, Mr. Robin?
Not until that night.
Now, what do you recall after you are down on the ground with your legs in the aisle?
We're down on the ground at that point. I asked Pierce, what do we do? At that point, he just said, pray. I could hear Pierce praying. He was kind of holding on to part of my lower half. I was kind of hanging on to his legs. During that moment, the consistency of the gunfire certainly slowed down and stopped for a second. At that point, I was, pushing Pierce and whoever else was next to him. I was trying to push them in so I could get my legs covered. In the meantime, you could hear slightly more sporadic gunfire still going on, not as rapid as it was at the beginning. And during me kind of struggling to push these people in to kind of take more cover, that's when I got shot through my leg.
What did you feel when you got shot through your leg?
Just an absolute intense burning pain. The first thing that actually came to my mind, other than the pain, is just the immediate, rush of blood out of my leg. You could just feel the warmth, down that whole leg, down that whole side. Like I said, very intense burning, tore through the muscle.
When Holmes said he went on autopilot, he truly meant it. He later stated that he did not remember virtually anything about the time spent firing his weapons. There was no sound or smells, and there was also just very limited physical feeling in general. He apparently doesn't recall even feeling the weight of the rifle in his hands. At some point, Holmes's rifle thankfully jammed, forcing him to stop shooting after only expelling 65 rounds from his 100-round drum magazine. According to Holmes, he stayed in the corner nearest the emergency exit for the majority of the time, only once leaving his post to walk down the aisle towards the main entrance to attempt to fix this issue.
At any point, did you go to those doors?
No, I went halfway down the aisleway.
About halfway to the doors? On which side?
Coming from in through the emergency exit on the left side.
Okay. Tell me about that walk and what you were doing as you walked there.
I was checking the weapon, and I discharged the magazine that had misfired, and was trying to put a new one in, but they wouldn't go inside they wouldn't click in there.
So what was your purpose of walking up that aisle?
To be able to see, because I couldn't see very well in the corner. And it was a safer spot to reload.
Was it a better lit? Is that one of the things you're saying?
Yes, the aisleways are lit all the kind of,
And a safer spot to reload.
right, so because they couldn't see me in there.
Before moving into that area, Holmes did say that he knows he shot some handgun rounds, but he doesn't actually remember pulling the trigger. At this time, a family of 3 took the chance to attempt to escape through the main entrance. They ran down the stairs and then turned to run into the aisle connected to the main entrance. It was then that they saw a silhouette blocking the hallway. They turned around and ran towards the emergency exit instead. Holmes was standing in the aisle, as we know, and when he saw the family now running away from him, he shot in their direction with his handgun, hitting all 3 of them. Thankfully, they all survived. The psychiatrist that later interviewed Holmes, Dr. Reed, asked him how he thought the victims felt during this violent and horrific experience.
So what do people feel when there's someone in the front right corner of the theater shooting loud weapons and screams being heard, things like that?
What's the question?
What do people feel when they're experiencing that?
Terror, I would say.
Can you expand on terror?
Well, they'd be very afraid and kind of unbelieving that that could be happening at the moment.
What do people feel when someone near them gets shot?
That there needs to be help coming.
What do they feel when they get shot?
Shock.
Anything else?
Just reaching out for help.
What do you suppose the people heard? They didn't have earbuds in. What did they hear?
Yelling and screaming. And I think the fire alarm or the emergency alarm went off. And it was making noise.
I'm sorry?
It was probably making noise too, but I didn't hear it.
Holmes then explained that he left one aisle connected to the entrance safe for people to escape, so that they did not feel the need to run towards his area and attack him in order to survive.
No, the plan was to contain them so they wouldn't start running. But I left that aisleway because I was kind of blocking the left aisleway and the emergency exit. So the only exit would be that right aisleway.
So why did you leave them that exit?
Because it was far away from me. And they wouldn't attack me, come down and run and attack me.
So the thought was they would go there rather than attack you?
Right, they'd run away.
Kind of a pressure valve, I guess.
Yeah, pressure release valve. Let them go down that way.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let them go down that way so they don't attack where I am at.
Okay. Those that did run that way, did you shoot at them or no?
Yeah.
Hit some of them?
No, I don't believe
As far
so.
as
I
you
think there were 3 shots though that went through the wall and into Theater 8.
Were you trying to?
I didn't know it would do that.
Were you trying to shoot them?
Yes, I was aiming at them.
Okay. The question in my mind, I guess, and I think you've answered it, but maybe not. In one scenario, you create a chute in which people go so that you can kill them. It becomes, in a sense, a killing field. In the other scenario, which you just explained, you create a pressure valve to protect yourself from being overrun.
Right, I didn't create a killing chute.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
I find it very ironic that he didn't want to be attacked, while literally massacring the hundreds of helpless people inside. Anyway, when asked how many people he thought he had shot and killed directly after the shooting, Holmes admitted that he didn't think he had done much damage.
When it was over, when your shooting was over, how many people do you think did you think you had hit?
I think I I hit maybe 20 people and maybe killed only 3 people. So
Yep. Sorry.
I wasn't sure I'd actually killed anybody at that time until they said there were people deceased over the police radios.
But at the time that you finished shooting and left the building,
Yeah,
I know that you didn't know for sure, but your impression was
somebody's probably died.
roughly 20 and 3.
Yeah.
Going along with this, Holmes stated that he thought he had only discharged about 15 of the AR-15 rounds, and maybe only 10 handgun rounds. We later find out that there were 76 total rounds shot that night, 6 from the shotgun, 65 from the AR, and 5 from the handgun. While talking about the end of the shooting, Dr. Reed asked Holmes if anything seemed out of the ordinary, if anything stuck out to him.
Is there anything else about the experience inside the theater that sticks in your mind that you remember vividly?
Just one guy in the front row was smiling. Yep. I thought it was kind of odd that he'd be smiling.
At what point was he smiling? When did you see
This was when I was going to leave, going towards the exit, and just looked back and saw that he was smiling.
What do you make of that?
I think it's probably a stress reaction that he did.
As far as you know, did he look alive?
Yeah, he was alive and moving a little bit.
Can you theorize about that? Just kind of blue sky, let your mind wander about that guy? What was going on with that guy?
I wondered why he had that reaction.
What might it have been? Just we'll probably never know. But what might it have been if you were to spin out a story about that guy? You look back and here's a guy smiling.
That it was probably a nervous or anxious smile.
Did you have any feelings about it when you looked back?
No.
Any thoughts about it?
No.
Any thought of shooting him or leaving more quickly or being afraid of him or anything like that?
No, nothing.
After seeing this man, despite still having several live rounds on him and an unjammed pistol, Holmes decided to finally leave the theater, putting an end to his massacre. As he walked out of the emergency exit, he tossed his rifle down and walked over to his car, opening the door. Police were already on scene, but initially, they mistook Holmes for a fellow officer due to the gear he was wearing. It wasn't too long before they moved in to apprehend him.
So you open the door and you're standing there. What happens then?
I take off my belt and put the handgun on the top of the car, and then the police officers come towards me, and I put my hands up and surrender.
Did you put your hands up before they told you to or asked you to?
Before, yeah.
Okay. What were you thinking then? What was your thought? What was your feeling?
They
then?
wouldn't shoot me because I was surrendering.
Why did you think they wouldn't shoot you?
Because I made a surrendering motion.
If anyone in the theater had made a surrendering motion, would you have shot that person?
I don't know, and I don't know if any of them did or not.
And it's a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
But you describe yourself when you're on the, let's say, victim end of expecting not to be shot.
I didn't know if I would be shot or not.
Okay, fair enough. So you put your arms up. What happens then?
Then they tell me to show the hands. So I take my gloves off and show the hands. And then get down on the ground. And then they handcuff me on the back.
Did they handle you pretty roughly or not, or how did that go?
It didn't seem that rough. It seemed like they were just doing their job.
At some point, while taking Holmes into custody, the authorities cut his gear off of him, stripping him down to his undershirt and boxers. There was so much chaos outside of the building, with cars and frantic people clogging up parking lots, that it made it extremely difficult for ambulances to get through. Those who were injured were running to first responders in order to get their wounds treated, which only further delayed the response to those in the theater who were critically injured. EMS was unable to turn those who were injured away, so they were stuck in the front of the building for the time being. Police, who were already back there, were desperate to get the help they needed.
We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims. I've got a child victim. I need rescue at the back door of Theater 9 now.
With ambulances unable to get around the building, officers opted to rush victims to the hospitals in the back of their patrol cars.
We're bringing out bodies now. Get someone to the back as soon as you can. Rescue personnel, I got at least 3 to 7 hits. Metro 10, Lincoln 25. Do I have permission to start taking some of these victims via car? I got a whole bunch of people shot out here, no rescue. Yes, load them up, get them in cars, get them out of here.
Authorities were having great difficulty getting Veronica in particular out of the theater, and were continually pleading for EMS to arrive.
We have one, we cannot move in Theater 9. Get an ambulance crew in here as soon as they're available.
PD is again requesting emergent medical to the back of the theater.
I copy that, I'm just trying to get things under control here.
Sir, I apologize again. PD is asking for emergent medical to the back of the theater. I believe that they have another party inside Theater 9 that they can't evacuate, which is the child, but they have 10 parties down behind the theater, is what they're saying.
I wasn't able to determine if any EMS personnel made it into the theater by going through the building, but it seems as though it's possible based on Jameson's later testimony. However, he only refers to those helping Veronica as first responders, which could mean police, so it's a little unclear what he meant. Ultimately, though, they were able to get the 6-year-old out of the building.
What did you do after Miss Bailey called 911?
After Miss Bailey called the police and the first responders came in, I started alerting the first few that came through the door that I have a pregnant woman that's
Objection. 403.
You can continue, Mr. Taves.
That I have a pregnant woman that's down, that I have a 6-year-old that's down, and I was basically screaming at them to get them attention as fast as possible. They came down. They immediately came down to help us. They checked. They checked their pulses. And Ashley had a pulse, but Veronica did not. So they carried Veronica.
I'm going to interject an objection at this point to 401, 403 due process.
The objection's overruled. You can continue, Mr. Taves.
So they picked up Veronica and they took her down to the stairs and down towards the exit, which I followed. The first responder that was carrying her, he began to give her CPR on the floor.
Could you please show the jury where it was that he gave?
He carried her down in this area. I'm not sure how close to the door, how close to this entrance, but it was in that row. And I when he put her on the floor, I got down next to him and
Same objection, Your Honor. 401, 402, 403 due process at this point.
You can continue, Mr. Taves.
At that point, he began giving her CPR, and while he was giving her CPR, I believe one or two more responders were taking Ashley past us.
Jameson jumped in the back of a police car, where his girlfriend Ashley was being tended to by an officer who was applying pressure to the wound on her chest. Keep in mind, Jameson had also been injured and was actively bleeding from his head. It's reported that it took over 20 minutes for the ambulances to make their way to the back doors. As soon as they were able to, EMS moved into the theater to begin assessing the situation. Craig Enland, who again was with deceased victim Alex Teves that night, later testified about his ride in the ambulance to the hospital.
What do you remember about that ambulance ride?
The paramedic in the ambulance was cleaning me off a little bit, wiping some of the blood and stuff from my face. I remember at one point kind of turning to my right, and there was a panel of medical equipment with kind of a glass or plastic case, and I could see my reflection in it, and I could see bits of something on my head, on my face. And I thought it was Alex's brain, and I asked the paramedic what it was, and she said that it probably wasn't that it was pieces of fat, but either way it was pieces of Alex.
In all, 12 people lost their lives as a result of the attack, and over 70 people were injured, including those next door in Theater 8. Many of the survivors were shot in vital areas, including the chest and head. The deceased victims all suffered horrific wounds as well. Many of the victims' families were not notified of their deaths, and they turned to the media to help locate their family members. Some even stood outside of the movie theater pleading for help to figure out where they were. Obviously, eventually they found out the very sad reality that their loved ones were gone. Jonathan Blunk, 26, was killed after being shot once in the head and once in the torso. Alexander Boyk, 18, suffered a shotgun blast to the head. Jesse Childress, 29, was killed by a shotgun blast to the torso. Gordon Cowden, 51, died from a gunshot wound to the chest. Jessica Gowie, 24, later died at the hospital after suffering multiple gunshot wounds, once to the head and 4 to her torso and limbs. John Larimer, 27, was killed after being shot in the chest and abdomen. Matt McQuinn, 27, who was seated in the front row, was shot more times than anyone else, 9 times in total. His most extensive injuries were to the neck and chest. Michaela Medic, 23, died as the result of being shot in the chest. Veronica Moser Sullivan, 6, was killed after being shot 4 times, with the ultimate cause of death being a shot to the chest. Alex Sullivan, 27, suffered a rifle wound to the chest. Alexander Teves, 24, died after being shot in the head by the rifle. Rebecca Wingo, 32, was killed after being shot by both the shotgun and the AR-15 in the head, as well as other wounds to her torso and limbs. During the later trial, the jury was shown photos of most of the deceased victims, while their injuries were read aloud. I just can't imagine having to sit through that. Now, let's talk about Holmes's apartment and the state of terror he left it in. As mentioned before, according to Holmes, he had begun the process of building homemade explosive and incendiary devices a few days before the actual shooting took place. During the interview with Dr. William Reed, Holmes was shown this picture of his apartment, and he described what can be seen in the image, and how he went about constructing the incendiary devices, as well as the jars filled with live bullets and homemade napalm that littered the floor.
This is all the incendiary devices I made. So I ordered a bunch of fireworks, like cannon shells, in like 3-inch and 6-inch diameter.
So the spherical things are firework cannon or firework things that get loaded into cannon and shot up for fireworks. Is that?
I assume that's how they work. Yeah.
Okay.
In these photos, you can see several 2-liter bottles that are filled with gasoline. Also pictured are jugs of gunpowder, as well as diesel fuel poured out onto the carpet in multiple areas. You can also see white smokeless powder scattered on the floor throughout the entrance. Also on the ground was thermite, and the homemade napalm jars loaded with .45 caliber bullets meant to cause serious damage when ignited. Holmes goes on to explain how he wired the devices up to a transmitter, which was a firework or model rocket control box. This creepy picture of Holmes shows the actual control box behind him. Apparently, the igniter was remote operated and could be triggered by one press of a button. Holmes was also asked if he ever tested the devices, to which he went into detail on how he thought the bombs wouldn't actually work, and how his initial intention was to just make them look bomb-like and frightening, so the authorities would focus their resources solely on the apartment. His plan was ultimately to divert the police's attention to this location in order to give him more time at the theater before they arrived.
Did you ever test that stuff?
No, I didn't get to test any of the incendiary devices, or so I was figuring they wouldn't work.
Really?
Yeah, and it was just made to look bomb-like. Like, that's really scary. But we have to divert attention to over here.
Did you think, and it sounds like one possibility is that they would be diverted to the apartment before the shootings began.
Yeah, that's the plan.
That was the plan. And how were you planning to accomplish that?
Through a noise complaint from the neighbors to bring them there.
Okay. I heard about the noise complaint idea. I didn't realize that you met prior to the shooting. And how was that set up?
That was just set up to my computer, where loud music would play after 15 minutes of silence. So it was like there was just silence on the timer.
So you left, the computer was on, and 15 minutes later the loud music was supposed to start, is that right?
Yes.
He also left the front door unlocked, giving police easy access to the apartment when they did ultimately show up.
So a person would complain in the plan to the police, and the police would go to the apartment, bang on the door, open the door.
Yeah, I left the door unlocked.
Okay. As you were thinking about that, did you consider the possibility that a person might have come to the door, that is a non-police person, might have come to the door?
Yeah, and so that's why when I sent a tripwire, I didn't have it attached to the door. I had it kind of inside, so they'd be able to see inside, but not go to like disable anything, because there's an obstacle in the way.
Okay. So if the person who opens the door could see what was there,
then they definitely call the police.
They would call the cops. It occurs to me that the cops also would not, once they saw it, they wouldn't rush in either.
Right, but they'd be kind of stuck at the scene.
Okay, the diversion would have worked.
Right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I gave it like a small likelihood that any of it would work. But
Holmes also put a boombox outside by the apartment's trash cans, with the same audio file that was set to blast music after 15 minutes of silence from his computer in the apartment.
There was something in a dumpster also. I'm trying to think what it was. Does that ring a bell?
No, I didn't put anything in the dumpster. There was something beside the dumpster.
What was that?
The boom box, also with the timer on it, on a CD. And I put the remote for triggering the transmitter thing, so a random person outside could be able to trigger the fuses. That was just like a random factoring into the equation.
So that would have been another possible way to set off some or all of the incendiary devices. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Holmes set this up so that anyone who happened upon the boombox might think that the remote nearby controlled it and would press the button in hopes of shutting the blaring music off, unknowingly triggering the devices he had set up inside, causing the apartment to erupt in flames. His plan for neighbors to report a noise complaint did end up working, as one lady who lived in the same building, Caitlin Fonzie, placed a call to police to report the disturbance after almost entering the apartment on her own.
Hi,
Hi, I was just calling to report like a noise disturbance in my apartment complex.
Okay. And what apartment is it coming from?
It's coming from apartment 10.
Okay, so what kind of noise is it?
It's just really, really loud music, like the bass. I went on there and tried to knock on their door, and nobody would come to the door, so.
Caitlin later testified about this.
How long did this go on?
It lasted ultimately for about an hour.
Now, you said that you thought it started somewhere around midnight, or?
Yes.
Did you ultimately do something about it or try to do something about it?
Yes, I did. I actually went upstairs. Well, first I exited my apartment and went downstairs to see if the music was coming from downstairs or not. It was so loud it was hard to tell. But when I went up the stairs, I noticed it getting louder, and then I noticed that it was coming from apartment number 10.
So what did you do?
So I knocked on the door, and I told them to shut off the music, but I didn't hear anyone in the apartment. So I thought about opening the door. I had my hand on the doorknob, but it seemed like it was unlocked, and so in my better sense, I went back downstairs and called the police.
Why did you decide not to open the door?
It just seemed really off. I had a bad gut feeling that I didn't want to see what was ever behind that door.
So you went back down to your apartment?
Yes.
Nobody had opened the door, responded to you in apartment 10?
No.
When you were up at the door to apartment 10, the music was still playing?
Yes.
Could you tell whether there were a variety of songs? Did it ever change?
No, it seemed to be the same song repeating on a loop.
Could you hear anybody walking around, anybody that appeared to be inside the apartment that just simply wasn't answering the door?
No.
When you went back down to your apartment, how long was that after the music had started playing?
I want to say it was about 5 to 10 minutes.
Before you went up to the apartment, had you waited in your apartment before you went up to knock on the door?
Briefly, Christopher Rodriguez, my boyfriend, told me not to go upstairs and to just call the thing.
Sustained. Just tell what you decided to do, or what you said.
I decided to go upstairs first to see if I could deal with it by myself. And then when I came back downstairs with that weird gut feeling that I'd previously mentioned, I decided to call the police.
Luckily, she decided against entering. Despite Holmes being unsure if the detonation would work, it's very possible that her walking into the apartment, or someone pressing the button on the remote by the dumpster, would have caused more mass casualties that night. Back at the theater, after Holmes was apprehended, he pretty much immediately confessed about rigging his apartment with explosives. In response to this, many buildings around the apartment were evacuated. Police were able to disarm the explosive devices inside using a remote-controlled robot. Thankfully, none of the booby traps ended up harming anyone. In parts of the interrogation footage, Holmes was fidgeting non-stop. Now shirtless, he's seen prying staples out of the table for at least 13 minutes straight before he was caught.
Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing?
Removing steeples.
Okay, all right. Is that your shirt?
It was.
It was?
Yeah.
How come you're not wearing it?
Because they cut it.
Oh, okay. You cold or anything?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Why don't you just toss your shirt over here? Do me favors, toss. What's this? Is that yours?
It's what he's made out of his cup and his water bottle.
Okay. All right. Cool.
What's the blue thing that you? What's the blue thing that you have in your that you got?
What? It's the label.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Holmes then goes right back to what he was doing before, and also begins constructing something. Then he sticks whatever it is in the electrical outlet, before again getting caught.
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to not play with that.
After sitting for a little bit, a man comes in and places bags on Holmes's hands to preserve gunshot residue. He then uses the bags on his hands as though they are puppets. Three days after the attack, Holmes made his first court appearance, sporting his now infamous orange hair. Unsurprisingly, the judge decided that he would be held without bond. In the years following the shooting, Holmes's mental condition was continuously put into question. It was in July and August of 2014 when Holmes sat down with Dr. Reed, who was appointed by the judge to evaluate his mental state. In total, there were over 20 hours of interviews between the two. These were the interviews that I shared throughout this video. Dr. Reed asked Holmes about the aftermath of the shooting. During this part of the conversation, Holmes actually credits himself with bringing together and strengthening the community. The doctor also wanted to dig into how Holmes felt about his success in completing his mission and what it took to do so.
So I accomplished what I set out to do.
Okay. At the time, just after the shooting, you thought maybe you had hit 20 people and killed 3, you weren't sure.
Right.
Would that have been a success?
3 or more, in my view, would have been a success.
12?
Successful.
We're on the scale of little success to really big success.
Moderate.
How about the 50-some-odd people who were injured?
Collateral damage.
So does that come under the success column or not?
It doesn't play a factor.
Does it detract from the success?
No.
Is there any level of collateral damage that would detract from the success of 12 kills?
Oh, no.
1,000 wounded.
I'd only count the kills.
The collateral damage of damaged families, things that we talked about the last couple of days.
Right.
Losing a parent, things like that.
Never came under consideration.
How about now? Does it count against the kills?
No.
A slightly different question. Does it matter?
Does what matter?
All the collateral damage.
Yes.
How does it matter?
Well, people were maimed and wounded and injured.
Yeah, we know that part. How does it matter to you? To you?
Well, it's not good.
In what way?
In that they had to be injured for me to kill the other people.
Yeah, we know that they were injured for you to kill the other people. I'm asking you how it matters to you. If it does, you said it matters. Doesn't matter in terms of detracting from the kills.
Right.
But you say it matters in some other way or ways.
Right, because if I put my shoes into their situation, I wouldn't want to have that happen to me.
If you could have killed 12 people without the injuries and the family damage and things like that,
then if I had that choice versus another choice with the wounded, I would choose the one with less wounded.
you would have chosen the one with less collateral damage?
Yes.
Okay. Do you suppose if you'd set your head to it, you could have killed 12 people without the collateral damage?
not easily.
Was this mission easy?
No, it took a lot of planning.
Yes, it did. Time, planning, danger for you?
Resources, yeah.
What do you suppose the time, planning, and resources to kill 12 people without the collateral damage would have taken, more or less?
It would have taken more time, more resources.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think you could have killed 12 people in less time with fewer resources than you expended with the mission?
Then I would have needed to execute the people, go up to them and shoot them in the head or something. And I can't do that for whatever reason.
You can't do that, what?
I can't do that for whatever reason.
What are the whatever
Because
reasons?
it makes it too personal.
Some of the people in the theater were pretty close.
Yeah, I didn't know them. I didn't see who I was
You
shooting.
wouldn't have known the people on the street if that's where you would choose to execute them.
Right, but I would be executing individuals instead of a crowd.
You weren't executing individuals in the theater?
No, I was just aiming at the crowd.
Holmes' sister, Chris, later stated that when she went to visit him in jail for the first time, nearly 2 years following the shooting, she hardly recognized him. Whereas he was usually talkative with her, at this time, he only responded with one-word answers when she asked questions. She also said that he just physically looked different, citing that his eyes had changed since she last saw him, that they bulged out of his head. Holmes' trial began on April 27, 2015, nearly 3 years after the shooting took place. I obviously only showed a very small portion of what the trial consisted of, because there are hundreds of hours of footage. During the trial, like we have listened to, the jury heard witness testimony. They also watched videos such as the surveillance footage from the theater, as well as videos of Holmes' interrogation, interview, and also videos of him acting strangely while incarcerated. In one of these videos, Holmes is completely naked and is apparently smearing feces all around. In another, he climbed to the top of his bunk and fell straight back onto the ground. The jury also saw numerous crime scene and evidence photos, but most disturbing of all, they saw photos of some of the deceased victims' bodies, like I mentioned before. I'm not going to go super in-depth on the trial, because I have already shared a lot of testimony, and like I explained a moment ago, there is just too much to go through and fit into the video. Chris testified during her brother's trial and told the court all about their normal and happy childhoods. She explained that she believed Holmes was not mentally ill when he was young, though she admitted she didn't know much about mental illness at the time. While she did describe their growing up as typical, she did say that after the family moved back to San Diego, Holmes had a really hard time adjusting and struggled to make friends, like stated in the beginning of the video. His father, Robert, also testified, with him saying that he was completely unaware of his son's grave mental condition.
Have you heard the experts who've testified that James has a serious mental illness?
Yes, I have.
Prior to July 20th, 2012, did you know he was mentally ill?
No, I did not.
Did you have any concerns about him?
We certainly did. I mean, we know he'd broken up with his girlfriend and he dropped out of grad school. And so we made plans to see him. I assumed he might be depressed, but that was our main concern.
Right. Prior to July 20th, 2012, had James ever confided in you the suicidal or homicidal thoughts that he was having?
Nope, he's never expressed anything like that.
Didn't have any idea he was having these disturbing images in his head?
No, I had no idea he was having intrusive thoughts, disturbing thoughts, or anything like that.
Holmes' mom, Arlene, was also tasked with giving her testimony.
Were you in any way ever concerned that he would act violently?
Never. I was totally shocked that he used a gun. We never had guns in the house. We never
were hunters or target shooters. When I heard, I thought, how does he even know how to use a gun?
Many others personally connected with Holmes also testified, including his ex-girlfriend, Gargi. The psychiatrist that formerly treated him, Dr. Fenton, also gave her testimony. The first clip I'm going to play is when she was speaking about their first meeting.
You make some initial observations about the defendant?
I did.
Tell us about him.
Well, he did indeed seem very nervous. He was very quiet, and that's what I thought initially.
How was he dressed?
Looked like your average grad student, jeans or khakis and a just sort of nondescript t-shirt or button down.
Now, did you start immediately the conversation by getting to the statements he'd made to Miss Roth about ruminative thoughts of killing people?
No.
Tell me what you did.
No, I talked in more general terms and tried to get a history of what had been going on with him.
Now, this is probably a good time to ask this question, but given the role that you played as this therapist, how much do you rely upon the information that is provided to you by the person that you're treating?
Very much.
Other than the words that they say to you and your observations of them, would you have any other additional information?
In this case, no.
So after you talk with them about some introductory things, some background things, and are you doing that to develop a relationship with him, a therapeutic relationship?
Partially, I'm gathering information, and at the same time, I'm trying to establish a working relationship.
What's his presentation like to you as he's going over this background information?
Well, he remained very quiet. He would give very short answers.
You've had experience, by the way, with other neuroscience grad students?
Yes.
Did he present significantly differently than they did?
I would say no, other than he was very quiet.
At some point, do you begin to have a conversation with him during this session about issues going on in his life?
Yes.
What does he tell you?
He tells me he's having some relationship problems, that his girlfriend had recently broke up with him.
She was also asked if she had any inkling that Holmes was planning an attack.
Did he at that meeting ever express to you or Dr. Feinstein any increased detail about a target or a plan to kill people?
No.
Did he tell you that he had purchased a cell phone stun gun?
No.
How about a folding knife?
No.
Shotgun?
No.
Couple handguns?
No.
Talk to you about buying road stars?
No.
And we've already talked. Did he mention to you at this point about the gas mask and the tear gas canisters?
No.
Did he mention to you that he had solidified a plan to attack a movie theater and he bought 2 pairs of handcuffs at that point to use to lock the doors to keep people in so he could increase the body count?
No.
She was part of a slew of doctors, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals to testify in Holmes's trial. I wanted to add this witness testimony into the video because it really puts into perspective the pain and suffering that many had to endure on that day. But I was unable to find another place for it, so I'll play it here. A man named Caleb Medley, who was severely injured, answered just a few questions during the trial. He had suffered a devastating shot to the face, which left him paralyzed and with great difficulty communicating. Because of this, he had to spell out his answers with a letterboard during his testimony.
Good morning. Could you please spell your name for the record?
Oh, yeah.
C A L E B.
Could you spell your last name for the record too?
M E D L E Y.
Mr. Medley, are you married to Katie Medley?
Yeah.
And could you spell that answer for the record, please?
Y-E-S.
Mr. Medley, did you go to the Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado on July 19th of 2012? Could you spell that answer, please?
Y-E-S.
I have no further questions for this witness. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Spengler, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. May he be released from his subpoena, Ms. Tisch-Maguire?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No.
All right, sir, thank you very much.
During closing statements, the prosecution urged the jury to think of the victims and how they suffered from such an immense atrocity that day. The defense ended their statements by pleading with the jury to consider Holmes's apparent mental health issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of this case, I told you that at the end, I was going to ask you to do one thing, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do. Accept the mental illness. Acknowledge the fact that the overwhelming evidence is that Mr. Holmes was in the throes of a psychotic episode when this took place, and that we can't evaluate it based on statements that he made while medicated years later. We can't separate the mental illness from him or from this crime, because the mental illness is the reason, the sole reason, that this crime took place. In your careful consideration of the evidence and Mr. Holmes' future, I would ask you to do good, to be strong, and do the right thing. He's not guilty by reason of insanity. Thank you.
In the end, despite the defense's plea, Holmes was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to life in prison, plus 3,318 years for his incredibly heinous and life-destroying actions on July 20th, 2012. Through my research, I stumbled upon a massive fan base dedicated to Holmes, who refer to themselves as Holmies. Mainly women from all around the country write letters to Holmes, and some even include photos of themselves. In his jail cell, Holmes arranged all of the pictures on his wall. Some of the letters make me sick, and I will put some on the screen for you to read. Parts of them say things like, quote, "I hope you're okay, James. I'm so worried about you. You're all I think about." Quote, "One of the girls at your last hearing lives just over an hour away from me in Louisiana. I've never met her in person, but we're going to try to carpool up there for one of the next hearings. I can't wait to be there to show my support." Quote, "You are my darling, sweet as a dove in the morning dew, like a blast of sunlight in my soul." This last letter also has the mark of a lipstick kiss. There are several more, but I think you get the point. Along with letters, some of his fans have drawn pictures to show their support. With everything, including the sickening supporters, now out of the way, let's move on to the portion of the video for those who actually deserve to be talked about and remembered. The 12 victims who sadly lost their lives while simply enjoying the movie. Jonathan Thomas Blunk was 26 years old when he was killed, born on January 20th, 1986. Straight out of high school, Jonathan joined the U.S. Navy with the goal of someday becoming a Navy SEAL. Eventually, he moved to Colorado and actually attended EMT classes in Aurora with the hope of being part of law enforcement, while still working towards his ultimate goal of becoming a Navy SEAL. Before moving, he had been married and actually had 2 children within the relationship. While going to school, Jonathan reportedly installed hardwood flooring during the day and was a security guard during the evenings. Jonathan was obviously a very hard-working and ambitious man, but he was also described as caring, loyal, and helpful. His incredibly kind-hearted nature as well as his military instinct to protect others, made it possible for him to sacrifice himself to save his girlfriend Jansen on the night of the shooting. His ex-wife later stated that Jonathan always said he wanted to die a hero, and he did. His boss at the flooring company, Mark Cavadera, later said that John was, quote, one of the kind of guys that walks into the shop every day with a big smile on his face and brightens the atmosphere, unquote. 18-year-old Alexander Jonathan Boyk, also known as AJ, was born on September 20th, 1993. Being so young, he had just graduated from high school and was set to begin classes at the Rocky Mountain College for Art and Design that same year. He clearly had a passion for art, and his high school principal later shared that AJ was planning to become an art teacher after college. He also had the dream of opening his own studio. Those who knew AJ stated that he was always happy and cheerful, and always strived to make others feel this way as well. He was also described as very friendly, funny, intelligent, and someone who had a warm heart for anyone around him. AJ had taken his girlfriend La Samoa to the theater that night, and she later said that they were both very excited to see the movie. They had taken a selfie together just before the movie started. La Samoa later spoke about the moment that AJ was killed, stating that he told her they needed to leave, but was shot after taking only 2 steps towards the exit. Sadly, AJ's life was ripped away during what was supposed to be a happy night for the couple. This past July 19th of 2024, AJ's mom wrote a message to him on his memorial page. Quote, I miss your jokes first thing when you wake up. I miss your hugs. I miss your laugh. I miss all of you. I miss what a wonderful man you were bound to be, on the cusp of the adventure we call life. I know you hear me when I talk to you every day, but I miss you, the boy, my baby, forever 18. Please keep visiting me in my dreams. It's all I have other than memories. I am forever proud of the kind, caring, and giving, funny, and talented man you had grown into, always with me. I love you forever, my son. Mama, unquote. Jesse Evan Childress was born on January 6, 1983, making him 29 years old at the time of his death. All throughout his life, Jesse loved sports, and it was said that you could always find him playing a different sport each day. According to his memorial page, Jesse also loved comics and superheroes, even going as far as naming his car the Batmobile. Like the first victim, Jesse was a part of the military. He was an Air Force staff sergeant, as well as a cyber systems operator at the local Air Force base in Aurora. Those who worked with Jess described him as a good man and a great member of the team, also stating that he would help anyone who needed it. They also knew him to be respectful, intelligent, and experienced when it came to his job. That night, Jesse was at the theater with a few of his friends, at least one of which was injured during the shooting. It's reported that he too sacrificed himself in order to protect those he was with. The friend that he dove in front of, Muniri Gravely, later said, quote, I feel really sorry that he's gone, that none of us were able to at least hold his hand and look him in the eye while he passed. I lost a friend, unquote. 51-year-old Gordon Ware Cowden was born on November 17, 1960. Gordon's family later said that he was incredibly dedicated to his 4 kids, and that he always strived to do the right thing, no matter the situation. He was also described as a quick-witted family man and world traveler. He was kind, patient, and compassionate. I read that he once stopped his car just to help a prairie dog cross the road to safety. Gordon actually owned his own real estate appraisal business, which meant that he was definitely a hard-working man who did all that he could to provide for his family. One of his daughters later said that he would wake her and her siblings up with a tune, similar to how people in the military are woken up. She said, quote, I used to dread that sound, but I'd like to hear it now, unquote. That day, Gordon spent time with his 2 teenage daughters. One of them, Brooke, later stated that they had baked cookies and also went on a run together before the 3 of them headed off to the theater. Luckily, the 2 girls escaped unharmed, but Brooke later shared that her father made sure to tell his daughters that he loved them one last time right before he died. Jessica Nicole Gawi was 24 years old at the time and was born on November 27, 1987. In 2011, she moved to Colorado to pursue her dream of becoming a sports broadcaster, with a particular love of hockey. In a wild turn of events, Jessica had actually survived another mass shooting just over a month before she was killed. The other attack was the Eaton Center shooting. She had left the food court only minutes before a gunman opened fire, killing 2 people. Following this tragic event, her mother, Sandy, tried to comfort Jessica, saying, quote, "You know what, Jessie? You have seen the worst of humanity today, and you're never going to see anything like that ever again." Unquote. Sadly, this statement proved to be untrue. After the prior shooting took place, Jessica turned to her blog, writing about the tragedy, stating that the experience showed her how fragile life really was. On the night that Jessica was killed, after explaining that she was at the movies to her mom, she sent another text to her which reads, quote, "Get some sleep, Mom. I'm really excited for you to come visit. Need my mama." Unquote. It would be the last time that Sandy ever spoke to her daughter. Following her death, Jessica's mom wore her daughter's scarf daily and stated, quote, "I get hugs from her every day if I wear it, so I wear it every day." Unquote. Because she also loved traveling, her ashes were spread by her friends and family throughout the world, including in Mexico, France, Canada, Spain, and Peru. 27-year-old John Thomas Larimer was born on February 16, 1985. He was also in the Navy and worked as a cryptologist at the Air Force Base in Aurora. John was known to be very witty and always loved to crack jokes. He was the youngest of 5 siblings, so he naturally got along with his older peers. Growing into adulthood, he and his siblings had an amazing relationship. John was also with his girlfriend Julia the night that he died. They had gone to Walmart shortly before the screening and bought special t-shirts, capes, and masks to wear to the theater together. When the shooting began, John protected Julia by pushing her to the ground before he sustained his fatal wound. She wrote a tribute to him, which she read aloud through tears during an interview. Quote, "Dear John, I cannot find the words to describe how you made me feel around you. You gave me a feeling I've never felt before. I felt so safe and secure around you. The time we were able to share together was short, but that's all it took. All it took for me to fall in love with you. You were the one for me. You saved my life in more ways than one." Unquote. Matt Robert McQuinn was born on March 26, 1985, making him 27 years old. Those who knew him said that Matt was always reliable, and that you could always lean on him if you needed support. Matt had just moved to Colorado with his girlfriend Samantha the previous fall, and was working at a local Target alongside her. According to his obituary, Matt had multiple hobbies, including playing sports, listening to music, and hanging out with friends. But most importantly, he loved to simply enjoy life. That night, he, Samantha, and her brother all went to see the movie, even though Matt had an early morning the next day. When the initial shots rang out, Matt shielded both of them, suffering fatal gunshot wounds in the process. Those who knew him were not surprised that he chose to protect Samantha, saying that his love for her was obvious every time that they saw the couple together. One coworker said, quote, "I think they were just really devoted to each other, and they had the sparkle of love in their eyes when they looked at each other." Unquote. Michaela Carolyn Medic was 23 at the time of her death, and was born on May 5, 1989. Michaela was described as a free spirit, someone who took every chance she could to enjoy life. Those who were lucky enough to call her a friend knew her as funny, patient, kind, and bright. She worked hard to save up to go on a trip to India, while also paying her own way through college. She had been thrilled to go see the movie that night, even posting about it to Facebook, and expressing her feeling of excitement to her family before she headed off to the theater. Michaela was at the movie with her friends that night, who were rushed out of the theater after hearing her scream that she had been shot. After the shooting, her family was notified about her status. However, they did not know that she had sadly passed away from the gunshot. Her father and older sister spent the night rushing to several hospitals in the area, desperate to find her. Heartbreakingly, she was still in the theater. Michaela's friends remember her as a young, independent girl who loved hot pink and Hello Kitty. She was also an amateur photographer, and one of her friends later said, quote, "She captured all the moments that made her life great, and she has given us something we can always look back to," unquote. 27-year-old Alex Matthew Sullivan was born on July 20th, 1985. The midnight premiere took place on his birthday, and going to see the newest Batman movie was how he chose to celebrate it. He was said to be a comic geek and movie buff, so it's no wonder why he was looking forward to catching the premiere. He even tweeted about his excitement, quote, "Oh man, 1 hour till the movie, and it's going to be the best birthday ever," unquote. That night, he was with many of his coworkers, who also just loved to be around Alex. Alex was set to celebrate his 1-year anniversary with his wife just 2 days after he was shot and killed. He was described as a sweet, caring guy who treated anyone as if they were best friends. Everyone in his life absolutely adored him for his happy, smart, and funny nature. I read that Alex's father, Tom, at least for a few years after his death, went to the same movie theater to enjoy a movie in Alex's honor, as well as to feel closer to him. He said, quote, "I know Alex is there with me. I have difficulty going to the cemetery. I don't know if he's listening when I talk to him there, but the movies is something I know we're doing together," unquote. Veronica Moser Sullivan was born on December 23, 2005, and was just 6 years old when she was killed. Her memorial page describes her as artistic, energetic, and curious. She liked to swim, read, and cook, and she absolutely loved to learn. It was said that Veronica did everything she could to learn about the world, taking in as much information as possible. She wanted to experience everything imaginable. She was also very outgoing and strived to make new friends anywhere she went. Earlier on the day she died, Veronica got the news that she would be getting a sibling. Knowing how Veronica was, and that she loved her family, I think it's safe to say that she was over the moon about this news. In celebration, they chose to go to the movies that night. Another reason they decided to go was to go unwind after her mother, Ashley's father, had passed away from cancer 2 months prior. Unfortunately, the unborn baby didn't end up surviving like stated before. Veronica's great-aunt later spoke about her, quote, "She was a great little girl, excited about life. She loved to dress up and read and was doing well at school. She was beautiful and innocent," unquote. Being so young, Veronica had so much life to live, but that opportunity was ripped away from her. I truly hope that she was able to find peace after her passing. Her mother, Ashley, wrote a message for her headstone, which read, quote, "To our beloved daughter and granddaughter, may God hold you in his arms and you in our hearts. You'll always be our little pumpkin and my sunshine. Love, Mommy." 24-year-old Alexander Charles Teves was born on June 1st, 1988. Alex was an all-around good guy. He was described as loyal, enthusiastic, and funny. All that knew him remember him as driven and selfless, someone who did not hesitate to put others before himself. Those traits of his are apparent when you learn that he had just earned a master's degree in psychological counseling. At the time of his death, he was chasing another degree, this time in physical therapy. His memorial reads, quote, "Through his daily actions and work, Alex's goal was to help others, in mind, spirit, and body. He conducted individual, group, and crisis counseling to students and their families, as well as mentoring troubled youth, and dedicated time as an intern counselor at Human X Academy," unquote. Like many others, Alex was a hero that night, as he reportedly shielded his girlfriend Amanda from the attack. She described him as the most amazing man you would ever meet, stating that it was love at first sight when they met. Despite not being married or engaged, following Alex's death, Amanda changed her last name to Teves. She said, quote, "We weren't blessed with the time. In 2 years, we shared more love than some people do in a lifetime. When people ask, I don't call him my boyfriend. I'll call him my fiancé, or I'll call him my husband, because that's how I feel," unquote. Rebecca Ann Wingo was born on October 8, 1979, and was 32 years old when she was killed. From a young age, Rebecca was very smart. According to her memorial page, she learned to play chess at only 4 years old and was already reading the newspaper by 5 years old. Her intelligence followed her into adulthood as she enveloped herself in foreign language and was a Mandarin Chinese translator in the Air Force for 10 years. Those who worked alongside Rebecca remember her as an incredibly sweet and compassionate woman. She reportedly never let anyone feel left out and could always sense when someone was not having a good day. And of course, when she knew this, she did everything she could to cheer them up. No matter who you were, Rebecca would treat you with the utmost kindness. She loved her friends and family with all of her heart, but most of all, Rebecca adored her 2 young daughters. At the time of her death, she was working full-time, while also pursuing a degree. Her memorial page reads, quote, "Life goes on, it's true, but for those who knew and loved her, the world is a darker place without her shining light." Unquote. Following the shooting, a memorial was built to honor those who lost their lives and those who were injured. The sculpture features 83 white cranes, which start from the sides and eventually begin to fly up in the middle. 70 of them on the outer edge are for each of the injured victims. The 13 in the middle, flying straight up with translucent wings, symbolize those whose lives were taken, including Ashley's unborn baby. Thank you all for watching until the end of this video. I hope you were able to learn something new about this horrific event and the lives of the victims. Thank you again to our members for making longer videos like this possible. We really appreciate it. Also, thank you to our members for first suggesting the case and then voting on it. Please leave a like and comment on this video if you enjoyed it. It really helps the channel out. If you'd like to support the channel further, please consider joining our membership. Again, thank you for sticking around to the end. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And until next time, stay safe.